Hey guys, hey, I'm Selçuk. I'm a serial entrepreneur based in San Francisco, visiting my family and friends and meeting people here. And I'm an entrepreneur in residence at 500 Startups, which means I help with investments in our San Francisco accelerator, and I mentor companies and I do startups. So what I wanted to talk to you about is I started 3 companies. One was here in Istanbul, and then 2 of them back in Silicon Valley, and raised about like $10 million, kind of worked with a lot of the top seed investors in the Valley, and kind of has been an interesting adventure over the past 5 years. So I want to kind of take you through it. I felt telling some stories would be more fun than teaching some lessons, and hopefully we can do a Q&A session after that, and we can go from there. And what happened to my slide deck? No. There's like a blue screen in Microsoft. It's very...
I'll take this before you make another put. Secretive, we're opening it up. Yeah, I always have this debate with Amal. She's a Mac person, I'm a Windows person. I'm not kidding, like I still have a good stuff. And every time hers break up first, then mine breaks up. So far so good. Who can complain to anything? You can be honest, Danny. Anything you want us to fix fast? Except for the Wi-Fi. I'm not going to give you that. Geldi mi? Oh, the age-old debate of temperature with being different genders. Yeah. It hurts. Like, it's a gender issue, and it hurts. I will fix it. All right, except for the Wi-Fi and some sort of temperature issues. The room is hot, Danny. Everybody will keep on moving. Something we can touch, something we can fix. All is good. Fine. You have somebody complain about the map, that the map does not show exactly the space. I checked, it does actually, but all right. So those who have a map issue, please show me what you got, and then I'll try to figure it out. So I did the same. It kind of, maybe I know where this kind of might have helped. We're fixing it. No worries. Any questions you have? Yes, please. No. So who will win this? Who will be the #1 startup at the end of the day? Thank you for the courage. You're late.
Thanks for entertaining the crowd while I was gone. Okay, so this will be either the best or the weirdest presentation you'll see all week because of the tool that I'm using. And you'll see why I'm doing that at the end of the presentation. So, the quick way of introductions. I grew up here in Istanbul, studied at Koç University, studied computer science, and then moved to the United States, got a Fulbright scholarship, and kind of studied computer stuff. And after that, they sent me back to Istanbul, because what happens when you get a Fulbright scholarship is that it's a prestigious scholarship, they give you a bunch of money, the government gives you a bunch of money to study in the US, and they're like, go back home to Turkey and spread the American ways with the Turkish people. And I'm like, can I tweet? Like, no, you can't, so I have to go back. So I did that, and I came back out here, and with 2 of my buddies from college, I started my first company called İletken. How many of you guys are familiar with personalization technologies, like recommendations and stuff? So what it is when you go to Amazon, right, you click a bunch of products, you buy a bunch of stuff, and Amazon tries to understand you and tries to create an individually personalized experience for you. And there's a software system behind that powers that, uses machine learning and a bunch of other stuff. And it's usually difficult for other online retailers to do. So our goal was to basically try to build it out here in Turkey. And I was really excited. Like, yes, we're gonna do startups. We studied all this time, and like, we realized that it was kind of not that easy. We faced a few challenges. One of them was we were really focused on the technology side of things. We weren't really trying to build a product company. So we're like, hey, we have this awesome recommendation engine technology and we'll work with everybody. So that was kind of like a rookie mistake. Another thing that was tough on our end was kind of back in 2011, the investment ecosystem in Turkey wasn't really well established, and I'm very hopeful and delighted that it's growing really fast now. But it was really difficult for a B2B technology company to make it in Turkey back in 2011, and the market was kind of small. So we're like, this is not going to work. I'm going to Silicon Valley, so I took off and went there. That was back in kind of April 2011. And the idea that we had was like, hey, let's actually build a much better recommendation engine. And what I mean by that is a lot of the recommendation engines that you see out there tries to track your clicks and purchases to understand you better. And at the time, the opportunity that we saw was, what if we used Facebook? Right? Because Facebook knows everything that you like, who you are, who your friends are, where you're born, how old you are. So if the e-commerce site knew all of that, just like that, they could give you a much better experience. And that's what's possible because you would log in with Facebook, and when you do that, it communicates all that information to the retailer, and that was the idea. And it was a fairly new concept for back in 2011. And so when I first went to San Francisco, like, when people ask me, what's the best way to get to Silicon Valley? I say, get a ticket from Turkish Airlines. Because like that's kind of what you gotta do, right? So you just fly there and then you try to make it. There's like, if you need support and infrastructure to help you get there, you're probably not the right person. So I went there and I slummed it. I stayed at hostels and didn't really know anyone, and I was trying to meet with people at events and stuff like that. And after a while, I realized that I got to hustle, right? So I'll tell you a story. Usually people say don't try to get cold introductions from investors, like try to not show up and like pitch your idea because they probably won't invest. But if you are memorable and if you're interesting, they could, right? For example, one story that I had was, how many of you guys know this venture capitalist named Bing Gordon? This venture capital from Kleiner Perkins. It's like one of the best top VC firms in the world. And Bing had launched this capital firm, like capital fund called Social Fund. And I really wanted to take their money. And I was stalking him because one of the best traits of an entrepreneur is to be a stalker, right? You have to be creepy and you have to kind of make an impression. So I go to this thing and he is speaking on stage and like, I really want to meet him. I asked the conference people to introduce me to him and they're like, yeah, everybody wants to meet Bing. We can't introduce you. I'm like, okay. So at the end of it, I saw that when he was getting off stage, a bunch of people are going after him, and I didn't want to be one of those guys. I saw there were 2 exits in the conference room. And if I just waited on one of them, I have a 50% chance that he's going to bump into me. So I took that shot, and he did. And I pitched him, and like the elevator pitch, this is like where it's really important. You get like 10 seconds to impress someone. And he was like, I can't meet you. I'm going to go to vacation on Friday. And I was like, dude, I will drive you to the airport. Like, you should listen to my thing. Like, and I didn't end up driving to the airport, but 2 days later, I was having breakfast with him. And like that kind of spawned a relationship, blah, blah, blah, blah. So that kind of impressionable approaching to investors really helps. But actually, what helps more than that is kind of getting introductions from investors that they know and like, or entrepreneurs that they've invested in. So anyways, I kind of really messed up when I first went to Silicon Valley because I had this like huge ego and I was like, yes, I'm going to build this out, build this thing. All these big venture capital firms want to meet me. But what happens is the job of a venture capital firm is to have meetings, right? And they will meet you to understand the market if they like you and if they like the market, but that doesn't mean that they will invest in your company. And the job of you as an entrepreneur is to grow your company. Right? So I was like too bogged down on this whole venture capital thing, and I tried to raise a Series A too early, and I fail-whaled. And then I've changed strategies, and I started going after angel investors, and that really worked. Because the difference between angel investors is that, one, they target earlier stage companies, and they can make decisions much faster. So I ended up raising $2 million in aggregate from a lot of the top angel investors in venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, including first round capital, who are the seed investors in Uber and a bunch of these other firms. And everything was awesome, right? So, so I had like $2 million in the bank. I kind of thought about renting a hotel room, kind of throwing all the money on the air over the bed, which I didn't do. Or did I? I don't know. But the problem is, if you have too much money for your stage, it actually kind of not makes you too comfortable and kind of makes you kind of trust your gut too much. And that can be dangerous, right? Ultimately, you want your customers to determine what your product should be. So then we had a revelation. So remember, we were building this recommendation engine based on Facebook, and we were selling this to these top retailers like Zappos. And what we realized that really big retailers like Zappos and Walmart didn't really want to change their sites because they've been optimizing that for the past 10 years, and like they didn't want to try these cool widgets. So sales was really difficult. And we decided to pivot the company. And the pivot was, what are we really good at? We're really good at connecting, like finding a match between people and products based on information. So what can you do if you can match people to products and you're using Facebook? You should be doing advertising, right? We can build a much better automated, personalized advertising engine, pretty much using the same technology that we built, and that really worked. And so like, here we go, we're like really happy again. So now like SocialWire, which we recently changed our name to Manifest because we're not only social anymore, powers personalized product advertising on Facebook, Pinterest, Google, Twitter, for a lot of the top retailers like Zappos, QVC, Target, Neiman Marcus, and others in the US. And then, so at one point we were growing the startup and we hired parental supervision, like CEO who was really good at sales and revenue type of things, and like he's done tremendously well for the company. But as an entrepreneur, I was itching because I basically kind of wanted to run things. And I had another idea that was Boostable. And the way that Boostable as a company came out was I was trying to sell advertising to these big retailers like Zappos, right? And there was one type of retailer that was really difficult to sell advertising to. And that was online marketplaces like eBay, like Gitti Gidiyor here, right? And the reason is these marketplaces don't want to buy advertising because they don't make any money, right? If you buy something on eBay, like eBay makes like $5 and the seller makes $95, right? So eBay has all the data to do the advertising, but they only have like $5 while the seller has $95. So the seller should be paying for the advertising instead, right? But there's like no tools that the sellers could have to do that. And I was like, idea, I should just totally build that company. And I did. And second time around, it was way easier, right? I slummed it the first time, I talked to all these investors. The second time, I just made a few phone calls and raised like $500,000 in like 2 weeks during Christmas. Which was, and if you don't live in the US, Christmas is like a really hard time to do anything in the United States. So then, of course, we had some of our problems, blah, blah, blah. Like, for example, at this point in time, and then we basically got in the Y Combinator. So I guess familiar with Y Combinator as well? It's like one of the top accelerators in the world, like 500 startups. And then we ended up raising $3.2 million after Y Combinator. And the reason why it's easy, and the reason why accelerators like 500 startups and Y Combinator work really well is you not only get advice and you're not only encouraged to execute really fast in a period of 3 months. What happens is at the end of these programs, you get up on stage like this and you pitch your startup for like 2 minutes to a room full of investors like this, right? So the easiest way to raise money in Silicon Valley or anywhere in the world is to create a competitive dynamic between the investors. So you want the investors to compete for your shares. So the best way to create that situation is to actually pitch them all at the same time, right? If you pitch 200 investors at the same time, hopefully a bunch of them are going to be interested in your company and you're going to create a competitive dynamic. And I think we managed to do that at YC. So pretty soon after we started the company, we were one of the top companies coming out of Y Combinator and ended up raising $3.2 million seed round. And then everything was going well. What we did is we ended up closing Eventbrite, eBay, BigCommerce, all of the top e-commerce platforms. But then we had some differences between my sales team and my co-founder where like I wanted our customer to be the sellers, so kind of like a PayPal-like strategy, and my co-founder and my sales team wanted to go after the online marketplaces as our customer, which makes sense if you're going to white label the solution, but I felt like we would be too dependent on the marketplaces. So the best thing for a startup to do if you're basically undecided on a path is just go like one path and everybody goes in the same direction. So I stepped down, still a major shareholder, and my co-founder runs the company, and we're still doing really well. Right now, I am with 500 startups, like I mentioned, one of the top accelerators in the world. And my role is to help invest in our accelerator companies in San Francisco, and I mentor them. And it's a lot of fun. It's kind of like I'm trying to see what the startup situation is like. And one question that I get all the time is, should you move out to Silicon Valley? I think you should move to Silicon Valley if you're building a product that's at least 4 or 5 times better than what's out there. Because like Silicon Valley, like you need to be really distinct and unique, and you need to execute really well if you want to make it in Silicon Valley. Because there's more resources, but there's more resources for everybody, right? And so it's really difficult to kind of execute on not a novel idea in Silicon Valley unless you can execute really, really well, and that also is like an advantage. Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities here too, so yeah. And what's next on my end? So I'm going to quickly kind of talk about what I'm doing next, and I'm going to open up for questions. So one, I've done a few startups. I know a bunch of stuff about startups, but I don't know anything about being an investor, so I'm trying to learn from awesome people at 500 how to get good at that. Second, I'm actually a musician. I'm a singer-songwriter, so I'm launching an album in the fall. And if you Google me, actually, some music stuff comes up, sometimes more than startups on Google. And one thing we're working on, in its very early stages, is to create a platform to turn our ideas into startups, where we can put together teams and ideas and quickly create MVPs and hopefully test many ideas to start 1 or 2 companies a year. And the first company that we started testing seemed to work out pretty well. The idea was, like maybe I can tell you a little about how we kind of launched this thing to kind of talk to you about the process, about like how you can launch a startup in a really agile way in like a week. So what we did was I spent probably like 7, 8 years outside of Turkey, in Italy, in the United States, and one of the problems that I had was like the other 42 million immigrants in the United States, you miss your home country, and you basically feel sad, and like you want your Choco Prince or like some other shit that you can find here in Turkey, right? And like I imagine if I could find like a Choco Prince in a supermarket in San Francisco, I would pay 4 times the price tag, and it would be okay, right? If I found like the Penguin dergisi or magazine, right, I'd pay way more money for that. And yeah, that could be an interesting business because there's all these immigrants. So the way we started that company, we're like, yes, we weren't like, we have the best idea in the world, there's just a bunch of money to build that. No. We're like, okay, let's test this. This is an experiment, right? A startup is an experiment before it's a startup. So how do you do the experiment? We just set up a landing page. We're like, hey, do you miss Turkey? Get all the awesome shit that you can't find in Turkey here. And like we enable them to pick up their email, and then we ran some Facebook ads. Like we put like the picture of like a choconut, like a chocolate bar from Turkey on Facebook, and ran some ads and targeted Turkish people living in the United States. Very easy. You can do that in like an hour, right? And having started 2 Facebook advertising companies, like the average click-through rate of a Facebook advertising campaign is like 1–2%. So out of one or two out of 100 people that see a Facebook ad, clicks it. And we ran this advertising campaign, no optimization, and we saw 12% click-through rate. We're like, whoa, this is like, I've never seen this in my life, having a... Okay, so, and then we basically looked at the email capture, like how many people that visit the site go in and enter their email, and that was 33%. And I'd never seen that either. So like, maybe these people would actually give us money, so let's actually collect their credit card. We did, and they actually started giving us their credit card. I'm like, oh shit, I actually have to go ship them stuff now. Exactly, because like we took their money, right? We have to give them something. So we actually went to some like Turkish ethnic stores and bought a bunch of shit and then shipped them. And then some of our customers were like, this is the best thing that happened to Turkish people in the United States on Twitter. I'm like, okay, this seems like a business. And then we started scaling it. So like, no, like this is kind of how you should be looking at startups. Every startup is an experiment, and like this is like a lesson hard learned on my end as well, because like remember the pivot story from SocialWire, where we spent like $1 million, built that technology, and only realized that other customers didn't want to change their site. We could have learned that much faster, right? So like the reason why we were able to launch a startup in like a week or two was because we actually fucked up so many times before, right? And so the goal with what we're doing here is kind of build an awesome engineering team, designers, marketers, and test many of these ideas every year to basically hopefully launch 1 or 2 successful companies a year. And kind of like, imagine it like Rocket Internet. Like, do you guys know Rocket Internet? So they like copy stuff from Silicon Valley and execute it in other countries. Like, it's like the exact opposite of that. We use international people to create new and original ideas, but like very similar to the Rocket Internet model. And also, this slide was kind of weird because it was another experiment that we're doing called hipslides.com. So, like, can you actually build like a way cooler PowerPoint tool that's more suitable for storytelling using animated GIFs and stuff? And this is part of my experiment as well. So I'm experimenting on you. Thank you. So hit me up or sign up on this page if you're interested about this product, so I can collect some numbers. Yeah, so thank you. Thanks for listening. I can take any questions if you have. I'll start with this one and I'll go to you.
Sorry, I had a quick question. So you were saying go to the Valley if you're 4 or 5 times better than the market.
Yeah.
And we were listening to Dave McClure at TechWadi in Silicon Valley on Saturday, who was saying that 500 main business plan outside of the Valley is arbitrage. So there's opportunity. What excites you in the arbitrage space for everyone that's here?
That's a really quick question. I think there's a few ways to do startups, right? One, part of our goal at 500 Startups is that like not every startup has to be like the first to market, or like not every startup has to have breakthrough technology. There's so much opportunity everywhere in the world, and there's great entrepreneurs that can execute really well, right? So if we don't get to them at first, someone else will, or like the competitors will enter their market, right? So let's enable these entrepreneurs and create like thousands of entrepreneurs that make impact in these countries. So that's one thing. Another type of arbitrage that I think is really important, and I think you should know as like entrepreneurs in Turkey, Bulgaria, Serbia, you are at an amazing advantage compared to Silicon Valley. And that is, in Silicon Valley, we have money, but we can't find engineers. Yeah, they don't give anything to us. I went there and asked them, they were like, man, we're not going to give you any engineers. And like one of my friends, Nico Bonazzos at General Catalyst, did this tweet the other day, and it makes so much sense. He's saying, if you want to be a value-add investor in Silicon Valley, you should learn how to code. And that makes sense, right? Because like we have money, but we can't fucking build stuff. Because like all the engineers are divas, because they're getting paid $200,000 by Uber. And they will go to your competitor if they paid them like $5,000 more, right? So on the other hand, like for example, Turkish people were known for being like really good practical thinkers, right? We're really good engineers, we can speak English. The problem is, and I'm not basically saying this not wrong, you can actually build a very successful company by copying or basically adapting a model to your own country. But I think problems in countries like Turkey is that we are too comfortable just reading TechCrunch and copying what's out there, you know? And I think that's because there's a blessing and a curse that Turkey has. So when you look at countries like Sweden or Israel, right? Like Spotify, the largest music listening thing in the world came from Sweden, right? Waze, like this billion-dollar company that was acquired by Google for navigation, came from Israel, and there's so many other examples. I think the reason is, if you want to be the Uber for Israel, I would rather open a restaurant, right? Because there's not many people in Israel. It's not a viable market, or it's like Sweden, same. So you have to launch a global startup to make any money. In Turkey, we have so many people, right? But we don't have as many people as the United States, India, or China. So we can't easily build billion-dollar companies in Turkey unless we're shooting for the global market. So, but we can make some money, so all of our investors and entrepreneurs are like too comfortable and used to just copying shit, and that works. It's a good way to make money, and my hat's off to you, sir. Like, you've made a lot of money and you created an impact, but I think we should do some global stuff too, and I think we are at an advantage because you can build great companies anywhere in the world, and we have a lot of really great engineers. We just need to work on the right things and take bets and experiments. That's kind of how I look at arbitrage.
Well, this is the first time I'm kind of spending time this much with Selçuk, but I just want to. The reason is there's so many things that emerging market startups think, and that we just told it like an hour ago. It's just, he did that. Whatever we told an hour ago, don't do it, don't do it. He did what we told not to, and he learned. He's doing something great. So learn from other people. That's the reason why you're here. We'll take one more question, and then we'll go to Eric.
Selçuk, I want to ask about getting the eBays and, you know, getting your foot in the door.
Yeah.
You know, what was that process? How did you do that? You know, so sometimes you have a great product, you know, how do you get your foot in the door with those massive organizations?
It's a really good question. I think what you have to do, and I've sold to like really large organizations. When you think about Boostable, you're selling to sellers, but we're partnering with really big organizations, right? And I've done that with SocialWire too. If you're selling like enterprise sales, right? So what you need to do is, one, having a really good network helps. LinkedIn is like the best tool that you'll ever have to do this. So, for example, what I used to do is when I'm trying to sell to an online retailer, I just like search them on LinkedIn, and I find who I'm connected to, and I basically find which person loves me the most. Or like maybe I asked them like 10 introductions last week, so I shouldn't ask them more, you know? And I basically like, hey, like one tactic that I can use like to get a little more tactical, like let's say that Burak knows this awesome person at Gidiyor, right? So I go to Burak and say, hey Burak, thanks for blah, blah, blah. I hope this happened, blah, blah, blah, right? But I actually care about what's happening in his life. But then I say, look, I really want to connect with this person in this organization because we can help them this way. And I know you're really busy. And that's why I wrote a template in your voice. Here's what I want you to just copy and paste and email him. And feel free to change it. Right? So what I did is, like, one, I controlled the messaging that Burak can send email. And second, I made his life easier, right? So that's one of the tactics. But the second thing that you have to know is, like, what a lot of people in enterprise sales do is, like, once you get in the door, what you really need to do is, like, map out the organization that you need to go after. Like, who's the buying decision maker? Who's going to pay you money? Who's going to be your champion? Who's going to kind of, like, sell you in the organization after you're gone? Like, that doesn't necessarily have to be the person that buys your product. That's somebody who can really love you in the organization. And sometimes you have the enemy, right? And the enemy's got to die, right? So given that organization, how can you navigate the organization, right? Like, and coming back to eBay, for example, network really helps. For example, I am pretty close with the venture capital firm Greylock, who's one of the top firms over there, and Simon Rothman is like one of my mentors, and he's an amazing guy. He was a partner over there. He used to work at eBay, and he started eBay Motors. And he basically chats with the eBay board pretty often, and like he was like, hey, I was telling eBay about you, and like the chief product officer really wants to meet you. I'm like, okay, that would be good. So like that kind of serendipity, like sometimes the opportunities come to you, but other times you actually have to like act really smart, use your network to get to the right people and make sure that they give you the opportunity. Cool. So my email is selçuk@500.co. If you guys need anything or find me after the break, happy to be helpful.
Thank you. So there are 2 exits, and you can test which one's... No, okay. Thank you so much. Pleasure. Nice.